From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
It's the BBG, not the BBC. You're listening to the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester.
And a warm welcome to the programme. It's coming up for 3 minutes past the hour. It is Thursday, April 2nd. And I'm sure you know it's 2020. You don't need me to tell you that. It's been a pretty cold day in Salford. Lockdown day, I don't know. 10, is it? 11, 12, I've no idea. I look forward to hearing from you today. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter as usual. If there's something you'd like to get off your chest, I'm the man to tell. I'll be happy to hear from you. I've two great guests. Tony Gosling is in New Zealand. I spoke with him earlier on. And Hayden Hewitt of LiveLeak.com fame and the man behind TriggerWarning.tv has a disturbing story to tell that's very important about the National Health Service and about elderly people. Well, it's about more than that, to be honest with you. So Hayden Hewitt joins me hour two. We'll hear from Tony Gosling before that. I love being with you, you know that. Last live programme of the week. It's been a good week to be back. Despite all the madness, it's good to be bloody back, I tell you. Let's do the show then.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And there is actually some news being reported that isn't coronavirus related. Although you might say it is coronavirus related. Apparently, the Labour leadership ballot has closed. The race to become the next Labour leader is over. It's either going to be Rebecca Long-Daly of Salford fame, even though she's not from Salford, Keir Starmer, or Listen Andy. One of the three of them, and we'll find out on Saturday who replaces Jeremy Corbyn. Cat Weasel is gone. Cat Weasel spends tomorrow, Friday, his final day in charge of the Labour Party. In fact, he's been doing the rounds of the media today, Corbyn. He spoke with Beth Rigby on Sky, and he did something for the BBC as well. All right. Yeah, I'm still anxious to hear from you. You know, in terms of the lockdown, that's something that's of great interest to me, your experiences. You know, have you been stopped by the glorified, I don't know, the jumped up little busybodies that we know to be police community support officers? Are they asking you, where are you going and why, and what are you telling them? If you have any stories to tell me, do tell me. Tony Gosling in New Zealand, we'll hear from him very shortly. And Hayden Hewitt, this was all over the news yesterday. The surgery in Wales. We heard about a surgery, a GP surgery in Wales. We heard about one in Merseyside. Basically sending letters, in Wales anyway, sending letters to patients with life-limiting illnesses. So patients who have chronic illnesses, right, and life-reducing illnesses, they were sent letters asking them to complete a do not resuscitate form. Doctors said, we won't abandon you, but we have to be frank and realistic. Patients were very disturbed because of that. In the letter, these patients with life-limiting conditions were told that by completing a do not resuscitate form, that will bring several benefits. Number one, your doctor, your friends and family will know not to call 999 if you get very sick. Therefore, scarce ambulance resources can be targeted to the young and fit who have a greater chance of life. Now, this is a scandal. And I had a telephone conversation with Hayden Hewitt. If it wasn't yesterday, it might have been yesterday, it might have been Tuesday. And Hayden has been tweeting about it since. He tweeted, Hayden Hewitt of LiveLeak.com, one of the world's most popular websites. If you're in the UK with an elderly relative, you should know this. If they become ill, and not with coronavirus, there's every chance they'll be left to die at home without even seeing a doctor. This is not a conspiracy. This is happening now. We'll talk to Hayden Hewitt in hour two about that, because it's very, very serious. Anxious to hear what he has to say about that. So coronavirus lockdown then in the UK is going from the sublime. It's going from the sublime to the ridiculous on a daily basis. It really is. First up, hard to believe this, First up, Sky News apparently has changed the name of the station. It's no longer called Sky News. Honestly, here's the 4 o'clock bulletin this afternoon. I spat my food out, so I did. Here it is.
It's 4 o'clock. This is virus pandemic, global emergency. I'm Mark.
What was that? What was that again?
It's 4 o'clock. This is virus pandemic, global emergency. I'm Mark Austin. Coming up in the next 60 minutes.
Yes, it's normally the lead-in is it's 4 o'clock. This is Sky News. Here are the headlines. Now it's global emergency, virus pandemic. What did he say? I couldn't believe my ears.
It's 4 o'clock. This is virus pandemic, global emergency.
Did anybody tell Rupert Murdoch this is... What did he say? My attention span has really gone to shite the last few days. It really has, honestly.
It's 4 o'clock. This is virus pandemic, global emergency.
Yes, virus pandemic, global emergency has replaced Sky News as the name of the station. Yes, but virus pandemic, global emergency. I know. And there was a headline on the Mail Online today. Now, I've mentioned to you before, the Daily Mail website is the UK's most widely read news website, entertainment website, and news website. It really is. And it's massive. And they make an enormous amount of money out of it, the Daily Mail. Genuine headline on Mail Online today. This is true. Comedian dies from coronavirus as he was being treated in hospital for heart failure.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Now, Eddie Large is much loved in these parts, and well, he might be. He was a very, very funny man and used to broadcast to audiences on Saturday evenings in the UK of millions of people. Light entertainment legend, along with Sid Little. In fact, they were on television last year or the year before as part of a very interesting documentary series made by the BBC, where senior citizens, well-known senior citizens, went to parts of the world like India to see for themselves how retirement might look if you went to live out your retirement years in India. And Little and Large were on it, and they were lovely, and they came across great. So I grew up watching Little and Large and Cannon and Ball and Bobby Davro and the Generation Game and all of that. So when I heard that today, I was like, oh, that's a shame that, right? But this is the crux of it. Surely there's a major problem with the statistics around the fatalities around coronavirus. If they are counting people, God love them, like Eddie, who was originally from Scotland, who had a very serious heart condition, had multiple surgeries on it, and was in a very bad way, and maybe got an infection while he was in hospital, which is fairly common, and then passed away. So it's going from the sublime to the ridiculous. It really is. You might have an opinion on that. You might think I'm being a bit harsh there. 12 minutes past 5. But I put this out on Twitter, and it seems to have gotten a bit of interest there. I see a lot of this. I see a lot of it. In Ireland this morning, I was interviewing Tony Gosling. I recorded that, as I said, and we'll hear it now in a few minutes' time. In Ireland, I saw a headline while chatting with Tony on the News Talk website. News Talk is a commercial radio station. As far as I know, it's owned by Dennis O'Brien. I think it might be. Not a very nice man indeed. And apparently the average age of those dying from coronavirus in Ireland is 82. 82. I won't labour the point. Let's move on. This is your Richie Allen radio show. Let's hear from a woman called Fionnuala Ní Éileán. She's a Galway woman, an Irish woman, and a lawyer and a lecturer in the United States of America. Went to Queen's University in Belfast, and she now works as a special rapporteur for the United Nations. And why am I bringing her up? Well, she did a brilliant interview on Dermot Murnahan's programme on Sky News last night. Here, says Fionnuala Ní Éileán, here she says there is a second epidemic running alongside coronavirus. What could the second epidemic be running alongside coronavirus?
But the second epidemic, parallel to the first, is the epidemic of exceptional powers that are being used nefariously and not in violation in many cases of states' international law obligations, where states are using the coronavirus to do that which they could not do otherwise. And that is worrying in Hungary, but it's worrying in a number of countries around the world. Hungary is unfortunately not an exception.
Hungary is not an exception, she said. So what about elsewhere then? What about elsewhere? Where else are governments taking liberties with the coronavirus? Fionnuala Ní Éileán.
We've seen them in Europe. We see them in Latin America. We see there isn't a single region which is immune. And they're characterized by a number of things. An overuse of executive powers, a use of measures that are not really designed to address the issues of the health crisis, which is real, but go far beyond that. The abrogation of parliaments, the stripping of capacity of courts to review the kinds of measures that are taken, and increasingly encroachments on free speech under the guise of calling out fake news. But the news we have to be really concerned about is not just fake news about the epidemic, but fake news by governments about what they are doing to respond to the epidemic. And we could say that in part, one of the reasons we have a global epidemic is we had a singular government which was unwilling or unable to share the information that it had available to it with the rest of the world.
Well, you mentioned Europe. We have, of course, been talking about Hungary, but are there other of the mature Western democracies that you feel are heading in this direction? And can I ask about the one I'm in that likes to term itself as one of the oldest of them all, the United Kingdom? And, of course, you'll be aware that we've had a former Supreme Court judge in this country saying that the powers that the government now has, with the acceptance, indeed, beyond the acquiescence of the public demand for it, this is how despotism starts, Lord Sumption said.
Yes, good question or good statement, Dermot Monaghan. Fionnuala is concerned by what's happening in the UK.
I will say it concerns an office like mine when we see a government producing a piece of legislation that's hundreds of pages long in the moment of emergency. When we see that, it makes us wonder whether or not, in fact, those powers were sitting in a drawer somewhere waiting to be used, or have powers that have been on a wish list for some time. It's clear governments can use emergency powers in times of crisis, but those measures have to be finely tailored. They have to be short term. They have to come with sunset clauses, and they have to come with robust oversight, because the danger is that if we overreach in these times of crisis, that we're going to wake up the morning after the pandemic and we're going to find ourselves in weaker democracies, less open societies, with the triumph of authoritarianism in many parts of the world. And we may then have survived a health crisis, but we will find ourselves in a different kind of crisis, which is a rule of law crisis.
Very good. And you might have noted the first part of that answer. If you didn't note it, if it didn't grab you, listen to what she says again.
I will say it concerns an office like mine when we see a government producing a piece of legislation that's hundreds of pages long in the moment of emergency.
Yes. It concerns my office, she says. This is a woman of the law. Clever woman. Like the Cuttaford jib, she says, concerns our office when a government, in this case the UK government, has legislation running hundreds of pages long, ready the instant there's an emergency. Makes us wonder if they haven't had it stored away for a rainy day.
Legislation that's hundreds of pages long in the moment of emergency. When we see that, it makes us wonder whether or not, in fact, those powers were sitting in a drawer somewhere waiting to be used, or have powers that have been on a wish list for some time.
On a wish list, yes. I think she's there, don't you? Monaghan brings up technology then, and smart apps and smartphones, and this is good too.
I mean, and technology comes into this as well, doesn't it? Because, China is where coronavirus started, but also the Chinese methods for dealing with this, they were already part of the state apparatus. We're talking face recognition, surveillance of its citizens on a grand scale. Many Western nations are now looking at that and say, well, look how effectively they were able to deal with coronavirus, and talk here of things like apps being downloaded onto people's smartphones, them being able to be tracked. I mean, it could become compulsory then, more or less, couldn't it, to carry a smartphone and have one of these apps, more or less a digital version of an ID card.
Well, one of the challenges is when people are profoundly afraid, as many people are right now, when the threats to the right to life, which is the most fundamental of rights for people, is challenged, we're often willing to give away things that we would never think of giving away in ordinary circumstances. And some of those things include our basic freedoms, our freedom to move, our freedom to express ourselves, our freedoms to hold our most intimate health information securely and privately to ourselves. And of course, you're right, we have this extraordinary surveillance capacity, much of which has been used, for example, in security or counterterrorism contexts. And many of those security experts are now saying, we can repurpose this information, we can repurpose these systems to work for governments in the context of this crisis. But I would say we need to be really careful what we wish for in those circumstances. When we use or repurpose those kinds of technologies in that way, the clock doesn't always go back. In fact, more likely than not, the experience of emergency powers, if we look post 9/11, whether it's surveillance powers or the increasing use of biometric data, is that these powers entrench and they normalize, and the scope of our ordinary freedoms move so quickly away from us that we haven't even recognized that they're gone.
Here's a very bright, exceptionally bright woman, skeptical about how quick the new legislation, running hundreds of pages long, is suddenly ready. And a brain as bright and as alert as that must make the connection and must question the crisis itself. The genesis of the crisis. You've got to do that. Who benefits? She makes excellent points there about how the security and the intelligence agencies are now saying, we've developed all this technology for counter-terrorism. Let's now redistribute that technology and use it to help deal with the virus. In other words, let's turn what is already a surveillance state into something that was previously unimaginable. Let's give ourselves the power to follow, not people whom we suspect, but let's start following every man, woman and child from the cock crowing, okay, until they go to bed at night. She's brilliant, but surely the point must come when a lady like that, with that size of a brain, has to say, well, I wonder, they got the legislation there, it's all ready to go, maybe, just maybe, some of the people involved maybe had something to do with the crisis to begin with. It's 21 minutes past the hour. This is Thursday's Richie Allen Radio Show, live from the great city of Salford, here in Greater Manchester.
Renowned healer Mark Byersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Byersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbyersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Right, keep the tweets coming in. We're going to hear from Tony Gosling, whom I recorded a little earlier, in a moment. Keep those tweets coming in. Lots of them coming in. Hayden has been tweeting. You can follow Hayden Hewitt on Twitter. It's at Hayden Hewitt. He joins me in the second hour of the programme. What else is there to tell you? There was something else, but we're going to hear from Tony Gosling. Let's hear from Tony. You know who Tony Gosling is? Former BBC presenter. Former BBC journalist. He's a radio presenter at BCfm in Bristol, where he is one half of the team that presents the Politics Show, which is an excellent programme. He's brilliant, Tony. He has a website called bilderberg.org, which for me is it's a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about Bilderberg. He did stellar work on the 7th of July bombings 2005 too, throwing real doubt on the official narrative there. He's a really top man, Tony, and I've known him for many years. He's a good friend. But he's travelling in New Zealand. And the last time we spoke, which was before I became ill, back in late January, early February, he was about to head to New Zealand for his trip, for his extended holiday. So he's there, and he's been there since this coronavirus thing blew up. So we'll just jump straight into it, because as soon as I phoned him this morning, we got straight into it. Here's me with Tony Gosling of thisweek.org.uk, the Politics Show, BCfm. Me and Tony this morning. He's in New Zealand. Tony Gosling, how in the name of God are you? First of all, before you tell us how you are, watching BBC and Sky News today, they're talking about the Foreign Office and British embassies overseas. Are people in touch with you? And when you need to come home, will you be able to come home, T?
Well, I hope not.
Because you're in paradise.
Life, it's lockdown in paradise. That's our little joke for it around here. Yes, the weather here is absolutely fantastic. It's almost empty, and everyone is being really nice to each other. There's a sort of people waving at each other as they're going past in the car and this sort of thing. Quite a camaraderie, and also on the national media as well. There was one of the announcers the other day I was listening to said, and now we're going over to the latest daily announcement from the fascist dictatorship. So there's quite a healthy scepticism about this amazing lockdown. The unprecedented, gone in the blink of an eye are all our basic human rights without a murmur.
Right, and we're going to talk about that. The connection is just about holding together, but there is a little problem with it here and there. We'll persevere for the time being. Now, before we talk about that, you believe that whatever this virus is, you may have had it yourself before Christmas. Is that right?
That's right. And I've also spoken to another colleague of mine, a chap called, I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning his name, Glenn Jenkins, who's a campaigner from Luton, one of the former members of the Exodus Collective. He actually went to his doctor because he had such a horrendous flu that wasn't going away. A couple of weeks after the worst bout of it, he said, well, I actually think I need to go to the doctor to see whether there's I've had some sort of serious permanent problem from this. I mean, yes, I spent 3-4 days in bed, Richie, aspirined up to the eyeballs with a book, and felt absolutely dreadful. And I was thinking at the time, this is back at the end of December, thinking at the time, gosh, if I was, an octogenarian, I probably wouldn't get through this as a really nasty flu. And then for I've never had this before, but 2 weeks after that, a very dry cough, most days, certainly in the evenings, as soon as you kind of sit down and relax. So the cough started. But yeah, I guess I've got the antibodies, have I? I'm not sure, because it wasn't supposed to exist back in December.
You might do. So is that your gut feeling that there's a particularly aggressive strain of flu that has landed on us, maybe like we saw back in 2014, 2015, and like we saw back in 2010, I think? Could that be it? Could it be a rotten, nasty, mutated strain of flu? Or is there some credence to the idea that there is a very serious, brand new virus out there? What do you think, Tony?
Well, these coronaviruses are not brand new, Richie. They've been around for years. It's only really, I suppose, fairly recently, last few decades, been identified. But yes, it's another mutation of this, or else potentially, of course, it's maybe a bioweapon. It's not impossible that biological warfare laboratories have cooked this up. I mean, I remember right at the beginning of this outbreaks, reading a report from New Delhi University saying that they believed that part of the AIDS virus had been implanted into this. Now, that may just have been planted there, put there, but I mean, it seemed like a completely legitimate report from New Delhi University's virology department. They put the statement out saying they haven't peer reviewed it, but they think the situation is so urgent that people should see it. So it's quite possible that this is some sort of biologically engineered thing, and that would explain why a lot of the press reports are saying that the virus attacks people's immune systems, because of course that's exactly what AIDS would do. But what is incredible is just the way people have kind of all over the world, in many places, not apparently in Sweden. I'm not sure. I haven't heard the latest today, but in some countries are just basically ignoring it. In Russia, I'm not sure how many cases. It's very, very few. But the main thing, of course, here is that we've given up our right to travel, assemble, worship, work. In fact, for many people, of course, their businesses could potentially be ruined. Most small and medium-sized businesses may well never be there again. I mean, I was just hearing on the radio here in New Zealand that even the national radio stations and the local radio stations are worried because they may not be getting any advertising revenue at all from these small and medium businesses that keep them going, so they may have to close. Now, this is getting pretty sinister when you start talking about our media shutting down, including one of my favourite shows I listen to regularly, almost every day, was Dan Damon's World Update on the BBC World Service. Now, that's just been unceremoniously closed indefinitely. So we're seeing a big media shutdown. Also, here in New Zealand, all the regional newspapers have been told to close, even though the World Health Organization has made it absolutely clear that you cannot catch this virus from newspaper distribution. That it just simply can't happen. So, we're seeing all sorts of rights being given up, and almost, it seems, voluntarily, without the police even hardly being involved.
Let me be devil's advocate. I love being devil's advocate with you. I obviously agree with you, but we're in the minority here. I recently moved to Salford. I'm right bang smack in the middle of the type of place I grew up in, a working class community. I'm amongst people that I identify with and that I understand. It's where I came from. And people are saying to me, and they are saying to me, you got it wrong, Richie. I had an aunt of mine on the phone last night to me, a very intelligent woman, my Aunt Margaret in Waterford in Ireland, listening to the radio show last night. She said, you got it wrong, Richie, you're talking through your backside. People have embraced this. They've not only embraced the need to be isolated and knocked down, but they seemingly are demanding more of it, Tony. They think we're crazy, that we're playing reckless and cavalier, geopolitical commentary on our radio programs, and that we're putting people in harm's way. Why are all of those people wrong? And the tiny minority, me, you, and a few others, why are we right about the lockdown?
Okay, so first of all, let's look at the disinformation that's been out there. We were told, and the thing is, everything seems to, the goalposts seem to have shifted. Well, they have shifted since the lockdown and the new legislation was passed last week. What we've seen is, for example, the Imperial College's official figures for the projection for the number of deaths going down from the millions to the tens of thousands. Just literally, that was just altered a couple of days after the lockdown, and this is the main projection that the government decisions were being based on. We've also seen Oxford University coming along with a completely different analysis, saying that there may be no more than normal numbers of deaths due to this, because there's a lot of deaths due to the flu anyway. Of course, it's almost all elderly people that are dying, or people with other pre-existing conditions, diabetes, etc., that are dying. So there is an enormous amount of interrogation. It's a little bit, I would suggest, like the initial stages immediately after 9/11 and the 7/7 attacks, where we got fed basically, now this is what happened, and that's the end of it, and without any proper inquiry. Now there are some questions coming out now a week later, but various things have changed since we first heard about this. I mean, for example, all the figures that were coming through from Italy beginning of last week, just before the lockdown and around the time of the lockdown, were pretty shocking. But now figures are suggesting that the Italians, many of the Italians were dying of these pre-existing conditions. And doctors are saying, effectively, that what's happened is a major change in the way illnesses are reported. And that is very simple. I mean, I've seen several doctors around the world, one Swiss, one a German one, another British one, saying what's happening is that the figures of people with this virus are being included when they have no symptoms whatsoever. They just tested positive. Now, they've never known a epidemic of some sort where people who have no symptoms are being tested, and when they get tested positive, go in with the figures. So this is seen to be, in many epidemiological circles, to be completely malpractice. Now, one could, if one was cynical, say that they're trying to massage the figures up to sensationalise. I'm sure the mass media would never do that, Richie, would they?
Yeah, and I've got to give a nod here to the American journalist John Rappaport, because he's done some really good and really credible writing on this in recent weeks. And he's dug down into the actual test for this virus, and he's highlighted, using the World Health Organization's own data and own documentation, that the test is throwing up lots and lots of false positives. And this is a worry. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the media for a minute. I'm staggered because I didn't know, and thank God for you being there to be able to report it. I didn't know that regional newspapers in New Zealand have been told to close down. I mean, if that's not an absolutely grotesque attack on press freedom, I don't know what is. We can come back to that in a minute. But what UK media personalities like, you know, Peston and Kay Burley and Adam Bolton and all the rest of them, Kunsberg, of course, on the BBC, they seem to be goading government ministers rather than ask. I mean, it's so awkwardly. It's not awkward. It's so perverse, this. And I mean, you as a former BBC journalist, you as a real journalist, a qualified man yourself, this must make you absolutely sick. They're supposed to be challenging the lockdown, standing on the side of the people, demanding that we're not being hoodwinked. Yet the media personalities I just mentioned, when they've got government politicians on, they're berating them for not making the lockdown even more stringent. It's like year after year, Tony. I think I'll never see the media as bad as it is now, but then something else happens and they seem to outdo themselves. It's shocking, this. I don't know what to tell people about it.
Well, I think you just have to compare it to some of the other cons that the mass media have inflicted on us over the years. The appalling coverage of the death of Diana, the inquest of Princess Diana, where it's pretty obvious that, well, I mean, it's obvious to John Morgan and anyone else that bothers to study the police reports, the transcript of the inquest, I'm talking about the French and the British police reports, which John had, and he pulled out all sorts of interesting information for them. That's the death of Diana, an assassination. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. The weapons of mass destruction in Iraq is probably the most famous one, the illegal war that then followed that Catherine Gunn very successfully made into an illegal war quite by blowing the whistle, and The Guardian, and I wonder very much whether anyone who was blowing the whistle from GCHQ would get anything in The Guardian nowadays. Yeah. And then, of course, we had the whole 9/11 and 7/7 stuff. Well, anyone that looks into 9/11 will know that the Building 7, which wasn't reported, collapsed supposedly due to a fire. No, it was brought down by a controlled demolition. In fact, Alaska University has just done a report saying that they lied when they said that it was brought down by fire. So the 7/7 attacks, which I've looked at very closely myself, we had all sorts. I mean, there was no public inquiry into that. Unbelievable, really. There were just a series of inquests. There should have been a public inquiry, which is where you can get lots of deaths investigated at the same time. They never did that. And we had Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli embassy early that morning getting a warning that it was going to take place, although it was supposed to be a surprise attack. None of this was really looked into or investigated properly. We've had intimidation of journalists. We had Terry Lloyd, who was the ITV News journalist, actually just blown up by American soldiers in Iraq. Gabby Rado died in mysterious circumstances. He was a senior correspondent for Channel 4 News. We had Michael Hastings, who was the reporter. He was an author and a journalist, a very, very good US journalist who was reporting on the criminal activities of the US Army in Afghanistan, basically. And then he died in a mysterious car crash where it looked like his car had been remotely taken over, doing 80 miles an hour down a suburban street with his feet on the foot brake, on the foot brake, as it was filmed by the police car. Gary Webb, the list goes on. So journalism has been under attack, I think, and ever since the kind of 1980s, 1990s, what we've been having is a kind of stenography system where people are just told what to think, and there's no critical thinking and no interrogation of the facts. And therefore, the people who are putting forward these sorts of measures, which take away our civil liberties, are just basically getting a free ride from the mass media. With all their massive billions of pounds and dollars of resources, they're not even asking the questions, let alone failing to get answers for them. They're not even asking them, Richie.
Yeah, when I started off in commercial media, we took, like they would today, we got press releases from governments and from commercial entities, and from not just from governments and commercial enterprises, but we also got press releases from news organisations like Reuters and so on. But there was a practice when I started out. There was a practice to be immediately sceptical and to try and poke holes in that which you were given via press release. But I would imagine, and it's been some years now since I was in a newsroom, I would imagine that the conduct or the code of practice today is when a press release comes down, rewrite it for the spoken word and broadcast it full stop. That's it, basically. Don't poke any holes in it. If it's coming from the World Health Organization, if it's coming from Whitehall, just rewrite it for broadcast lingo and say it, go to an ad break, say it again, go to another ad break, and then leave your program and let the next presenter come in. That's what we have now. And it's horrendous.
I mean, the other thing, to mention about this is, this is going to massively affect advertising revenues for the independent, shall we say, commercial sector. I wouldn't cry any tears for Sky and Rupert Murdoch, but you may well find ITV going under because of something like this. And then all you've got, of course, is the state broadcast. I mean, we're talking about the Ministry of Truth is all that would be left. But, there's so much in particularly two things I'd like to point out about the things like the cause of death. I mean, this is obviously being exaggerated. First of all, you've got many underlying illnesses which are actually involved in the cause of death, and yet that death has got to be reported as a coronavirus death. It's not actually a coronavirus death. It's a death which coronavirus has contributed to in a large or small degree. Also, the testing regimes are very, very different in many, many places. It may be that the reason that Russia has got so few results is because they're not testing people. We're not really being told much about that. No. I mean, they're doing quite a lot of testing in the UK, but it's obviously going to have a massive impact on the number of results you get. So you can almost change your number of test results and the number of deaths, of course, because people may be dying. And in fact, I'm almost certain that people have died of this without ever being tested for it. Maybe back in December, January, even in the UK. I had a very close friend of mine who was in his late 70s who died of a respiratory illness back in January. And I mean, that was a funeral took place, etc., before any of this came out. Everyone was very surprised, thought he was reasonably healthy, and he just we didn't know why. So the testing regime, and whether you're testing people who are ill, whether you're testing people that are not ill, whether you're testing people that think they might have it but don't, that has a massive impact on what figures you're actually going to get out every day. So these underlying questions are simply not being addressed. They're being left to the government to just change those things without really often saying much about it. And the other thing, Richie, which I found absolutely shocking and incredible a couple of days ago, was in the Telegraph and the Express. I'm not sure if it was anywhere else, but the government had imported a whole load of coronavirus testing kits from the continent, only to find that they were actually themselves contaminated with the live virus.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that you're going to test somebody that thinks they may have it and then actually give them this virus as part of the test. Now, this is shocking, and it makes you wonder whether or not that was deliberate. It's a very, very difficult thing for any proper pharmaceutical company to contaminate a test with a live virus. This just doesn't, to me, beggars belief.
And these are fair questions to be asking, and they're not being asked. You made a very important point that's worth reiterating there. The categorization of the death as due to coronavirus. That's a very smart observation you made there. I see two different approaches, ironically. I see ITN News, which is still saying such and such a person died after being diagnosed with coronavirus. That's kind of fair. It's a bit ambiguous, but it's kind of fair. Sky and the BBC, right across the programmes, pretty much such and such a person died of coronavirus. You made the distinction there. It's very important. A virus won't kill a healthy person, but it will be very problematic for somebody with an underlying condition. I'm a very fit man, Tony. I've got asthma. I developed asthma as an adult. Every now and then I get a bit of an attack. It's no big deal because I don't smoke. I never have done. And I'm very, very fit. But if I live to be into my mid-70s, late 70s, 80s, if I live that long, well then as an older man, as a tall man, having had the asthma and the bronchial things, I would be more susceptible to a virus then. So it's a very important distinction that people are not dying of coronavirus. They are people whose immune systems are compromised anyway, and the last thing in the world they needed was a nasty strain, and in it comes. I want to talk about freedoms. There was an amazing woman on Sky News last night whom I'm ashamed to say I never heard of, but I recorded the audio and it will go out on the radio show. It'll have gone out by the time people hear me and you speak, actually. I'm going to put it on in the monologue. Her name is Fionnuala Ní Éileán. She's obviously an Irish woman from Galway, but she's a lawyer based in America, and she's a UN special rapporteur. And she said to Dermot Murnaghan on Sky News last night, and I thought, go girl. I was proud to be Irish tea. She said, I reckon that all of a sudden, she said, we get these recommendations, these lockdown recommendations and these restrictions. And they're 1,000 pages long, she said. It seems to me, she said, that they've been sitting in a drawer for some time on a wish list for governments, including this government, looking for an excuse, basically, to roll this stuff out. And she said it's dangerous. And she talked about the atmosphere in America post 9/11. And of course, on Sky, they couldn't wait to get her off then. Get her off. You can imagine them in the gallery. Get her off, thank her and move on. But that was a very interesting point. Would you go along with that these restrictions have been on a wish list, locked away in a drawer for some time, waiting for an opportunity like this? Or does that give us a clue that they weren't waiting for an opportunity? We go back to the bioweapon thing, that maybe the virus, this illness epidemic has been created, has been landed on us to open up that drawer and to take out these documents to say, right, here you are, new powers. What do you think?
Well, that's a conspiracy theory too far, Richie. I think it's just, the fact is that these people are just very quick typists, and they can churn out 3,000 pages of very tightly argued stuff in just a matter of minutes, don't you? Look, I mean, obviously there is a big agenda behind a lot of this, and it's been going for many years. Anyone that wants to check out Catherine Albrecht and her work in the United States has been talking about digital ID, and they're already talking about this ID 2020. Bill Gates wants to have a digital ID where once you've been vaccinated for the coronavirus, you can carry this digital ID around, and then you can go on the bus, you can go in the pub, you can do everything that you used to do. Now, this is very similar, of course, to the social credit system in China, where you have first class and second class citizens. So that looks like what they make. I mean, it's certainly what Bill Gates has said. He's intending to bring in these ID cards over in the United States. So yes, of course, it's part of a much longer and wider agenda. I mean, Bill Gates was saying that a virus could be as bad as a war. He was saying that 2 years ago, I believe it was, at the Munich Security Conference, home of the annual conference held in the home of the Nazi Party and the birthplace of the Nazi Party. So a cashless society is another thing which has been pushed for a long time. Everybody is saying, oh, yes, we don't want you using cash. That's on the TV here, because it might pass the virus, that sort of thing. Although actually many shops are saying they won't accept cards. They want only cash. That's what I've seen here. And they just wipe the cash, with a cloth or whatever, one of these sanitizer type things. So definitely I think that this is the sort of thing which is not only manna from heaven for people like Laura Koonsberg, who likes to sensationalise and push specific agendas rather than to ask difficult questions, but it's also for this enormous lobby for the cashless society and digital IDs, Richie. It's exactly what they wanted. And the other thing, of course, not to forget about is this whole idea of surveillance. This is now becoming normal. The idea that contact tracing, contact following you. So, for example, if you develop the coronavirus, they can then go back through where you've been, which houses you've been. They're following your mobile phones wherever you've been, and then tracking you back. So now it's just normal to track people everywhere, isn't it? Because you might need to track them back to find out what they call.
And this came up in this interview between Murnaghan on Sky last night and the Irish woman who works for the UN, the lawyer. She's in Minneapolis. This came up. Murnaghan mooted this idea that we'll all have to carry smartphones in the future so that our location can be identified in times of crisis like this. And again, to the credit of the lady, she was aghast at this idea. Listen, it's amazing. I'm speaking to you now. Obviously, you and I are having a chat. The listeners are hearing a recording of it. It's not live, obviously. As we're speaking to you, it's approaching very, very late in New Zealand, where you're based at the moment. News Talk is a commercial radio station in Ireland, but it's a national one. I think it's owned by a guy called Dennis O'Brien. Not a nice guy at all, but anyway, we could talk about Dennis O'Brien all day long, but we won't. Wait for this. Jack Kwan, who works for News Talk, has published on the News Talk website that in Ireland, the median age of patients who die after being diagnosed with COVID-19 reaches 82, Tony. I mean, Christ, it's right there for people, isn't it? They're announcing in Ireland today that if you die from having COVID-19 or associated symptoms, you're going to be in your early 80s. I mean, that should send a message out to every Irish man and woman in the country today that should say, right, be careful around your senior citizens, look after them.
Well, okay, yeah, there's a really important note. I mean, when I've been chit-chatting to people within our social distancing here in New Zealand, I always ask them, are they looking after elderly people? Have they got elderly people around them? And if they have, I say, well, they should be on high-dose vitamin C every morning and high-dose vitamin C every evening, because what that does is it literally gives your immune system, whether it's healthy or not so good, it gives it always a bit of a head start. Or if you catch a virus, any virus, it means that your immune system has the building blocks to build those antibodies to fight it straight away, hanging around in your body. So for any elderly people now, it just beggars belief to me that this is not part of the coverage that we're getting, that all elderly people should be on that high dose 500 milligrams vitamin C in the mornings and high dose in the evenings, just to give them a much better chance if they actually catch the thing, to build all those antibodies to kill it off. So that's why have we not been hearing all that basic stuff? I'm not a doctor, but most medical people would agree with that, given the chance. That I think is really one of the key sides. The other thing, though, Richie, if I can just bend us around to a new angle on this, is the chief executives. I've seen articles about two or three that have turned millions into billions over betting on this lockdown, making loads of money on the casino stock exchange, saying that, I think that the stock exchange is going to go down massively, and they've made a fortune out of that in the casino banking system.
Prior knowledge, Tony.
The other thing, The other thing is I was just doing some research into this just before I spoke to you, and it's a company called Saudi Aramco, one of the most valuable companies on the planet. It was a share flotation in November last year by the Saudi royal family for one of the highest ever, for $2 trillion they got for it. And all of a sudden the oil markets collapsed. Oh, isn't that a shame? So the Saudis got rid of their 40, 50, 60, 70 year long, all the money that they made from all the oil over that time. They just cashed it all in just a couple of months before all this happened. Now, I have to raise the question, did they have some sort of insider knowledge on what happened? The other angle for me, and I'm sure some of your listeners won't agree with me, we had Brexit, didn't we, at the end of January, which all seems to have been forgotten about now. But I mean, this was the biggest problem and shall we say, nuclear bomb in the plans of the global elite, you might call the New World Order, certainly the Anglo-Zionist Empire and the Bilderbergs, the people that basically the political wing of NATO and political stroke commercial wing of NATO that make the decisions that fund the political parties, etc. That is exactly what I'm saying here, is that they had, I think, some sort of reaction to Brexit, because Brexit is spoiling their plans. For the last 50, 60, 70 years, they've been building up this basically totally undemocratic superstate, which Britain has said, well, actually, we're going to show the example and we're going to leave it. And there are many other countries around Europe who are looking at Britain to see how we get on. And I think this is simply their response to say, well, if you're going to spoil our nice plan to have a United States of Europe, then see what you make of this.
Yeah, I can't rule that out. I can't rule anything out, Tony. I can't rule anything out. Tony Gosling is with me. Tony's going to sit with me just for another few minutes. It's getting late there, and he's already done an interview, and he might do more. Just in the last couple of minutes then that we have, Tony, I want to draw your attention to something else that's making the headlines in the UK media today. And it is a video and some photographs of a businessman in Merseyside, or on Merseyside, who runs a very small shop that sells vaping products. And some footage has emerged of him being thrown to the ground and jumped on by a bunch of police officers last Thursday, and then arrested because he refused to close the doors of his shop. If that isn't fascism, Tony, I don't know what is. And why am I bringing that up? Because again, if you look at the comments on social media and under the articles online, the lion's share of the comments are with those who think, brilliant, the guy was putting people at risk, close his shop down and knock him up. The comments that are in the tiny minority.
Okay. Question number one, Richie, has got to be, was he allowing one person in the shop at a time, or was he allowing whole crowds of people to come into the shop? I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm not against the social distancing rules. I want to, stop the spread of this. I think there's a very strong argument for that, although you might find Andrew Wakefield, the so-called discredited anti-vaxxer doctor who has proved, really, that the multiple vaccines can be much more damaging to children than having no vaccine at all, and getting herd immunity from their parents and or catching the disease at an age where it's safe, which is what was happening before a lot of these measles vaccines, etc. He's done a brilliant presentation on the herd immunity and vaccination, and the failure of vaccination to actually it's made measles worse. So that is a whole other angle to this, which I think we should be looking at. But this I think is a good idea to space out from people. 2 meters away, you can have a conversation with someone. You can have a conversation with 5 or 6 people. I rather find it entertaining. Round here, we have sometimes 5 or 6 groups of people who are all 2 meters away from each other having a conversation by the side of the road on the grass or whatever, and they're smiling, they're chatting in a way maybe that they didn't do. And it's also this whole thing of sort of waving at people in the street as you go by, because there's not many people around. Everyone, is this a kind of camaraderie it's brought out? I'm absolutely not against that, but I think we do need to have a debate about whether vaccination is the be all and end all. The other thing, of course, is that this whole process of stopping this spreading is going to mean that this coronavirus virus is virulent still for much longer than it would otherwise be. It's going to spread it out. These viruses tend to work their course out in 2 or 3 months. They go round all over the world, sometimes just within one continent or whatever, but they work their way out within a few months. This one, it looks like it may go on and on and on because of the way the way it's being dealt with. Truth Stream Media is another thing I must plug, because they've done a brilliant thing about 12 Monkeys, which looks into the plans the MIT are saying that what they're going to do is they'll wait for a month or so in the lockdown, they'll release the restrictions in the lockdown, and then all of a sudden the disease will pick up again, and then there'll be another lockdown. So we'll have a series of them. Month of lockdown, a week of no lockdown, another month of lockdown. So that's what they're suggesting at MIT. And of course, this is exactly analogous to Naomi Klein and her whole shock
Tony,
doctrine idea. The idea is to shock you until you take the vaccine, you get your digital ID card, and then you're out and you can go into the pub again.
It's funny you say that about MIT, because Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told Talk Radio yesterday, amazingly, word for word, he said, what we're going to see, I think he said, in the very near future is pockets of lockdowns. Wow. And then he said to Mike Graham on Talk Radio, he said, followed by the vaccine when it's ready. And then he said everybody should have the vaccine. Final question, T. We'll wrap it up then. And thanks so much, mate, for coming on and staying up late to do it. I love you, you know that, and I'm delighted that you're safe and well and we were able to talk today. Final question for you. Do you believe then, and this is only speculation, of course, that when a vaccine is ready for this particular strain of whatever it is, that we will be told it's compulsory? Now, what I mean by that is they won't be able to say, Richie Allen, you have to take it, full stop, or we'll arrest you. I don't mean that, but compulsory in a way that they will say, Richie, you've got to take it, or no more concerts for you, son, no more going to the supermarket for you. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you how they do it. They basically coerce you to do it. So they take away your basic rights, things like right to travel. Let me explain what they did here in New Zealand. I've been chatting to quite a few people, some of them involved in the medical profession, hear about it all. And they were very annoyed a couple of years ago. They started to have mandatory vaccinations of the flu for people working in hospitals.
Yeah.
A lot of them were very much against it. They said, I just basically, if I catch the flu, I'm going to stay away from work. And once I'm over it, I can go back to work. And these are medical people. They know, they're not going to be putting the patients at risk, and they know that that's a safe thing to do. But no, the medical authorities wouldn't allow that. They said, well, if you haven't had the vaccination, you have to wear a mask permanently unless you're actually on your rest period in the restroom. Any point in the hospital all day long, you've got to be wearing a mask. And you know what happened? Bit by bit, they all gave in. Almost all of them gave in until none of them are wearing a mask. They've all had the vaccine. So this is how they do it. They'll coerce people. They'll make your life very difficult until you do it. And I think that's basically the way it's going to run. But I mean, it's all sounding a little bit sort of grim, but there are a lot of positive things. I think that this is a fear agenda. Isn't that what's going on here? Basically a power grab, but they're using fear to get more power by taking away our rights. That seems to be, to me, the main sort of object of this, but they can't break the human spirit. They're trying. They'll try. It's impossible. We've proved it in history time and time and time again. When I say they, what I mean specifically is, kind of secret government behind the scenes, the people who own the world, the banksters and the Bilderbergers and the these people who have massive equity funds. They own much of what goes on in the world, and they do have I think, a proactive agenda. They always want to have the initiative, so we are on the back foot reacting to it all the time. The P2 scandal in Italy in the 1980s and 1990s exposed Italy was being run by a secret Masonic lodge, P2, behind the scenes. They were basically the bankers, the media owners, and this is not a conspiracy theory. It's absolutely 100% proven fact. and that many of the top politicians were part of it. The military were part of it. The senior police from around the country were sitting around that table running the country, and the Democratic government were told what to do. And in fact, they even assassinated a former prime minister of this group, P2. So that's, I think, what we're dealing with effectively. And they may think that they're very, very smart, that they can tell everyone what to do, but I don't think it's going to be, well, I know it's not going to be possible to break the human spirit. I think you and I know that, Richie.
That's a brilliant way to end it, T. Thanks for coming on, mate. 30 seconds before we wrap this up. When will you be back? And just to go back to where we came in, is the government in touch with you through the Foreign Office or the Embassy in New Zealand? Are they concerned about whether or not you want to get home? I know you travelled to New Zealand, you've travelled around the world, but is somebody reaching out to say, how are you, and is there anything we can do for you?
Well, we're only 2 of 10,000 Brits who are stranded here.
Right.
So yes, I mean, we've been in touch with it's the High Commission here, because of course we are, still run by the Queen, part of the Queen's territory, and there's a whole load of stuff going on with the Maoris in Northland where they've set up roadblocks, but that's a whole other story. And I simply don't know, but I'm not in any mad rush to get back. It's so lovely here. It's a beautiful place. Lovely people, and there doesn't seem to be any particular shortages here. You can get what you need, and you can have loads of lovely chats with people instead of having to necessarily get a lot of them. Used to going to work every day. As I am doing quite a lot of work on this, I've got less free time than I would really like on a holiday. But the other thing is, of course, we've lost our show in Bristol, which is a pity, and we're just at the moment getting the technicals set because the BCfm has gone on to an emergency schedule, but we're just in the middle of getting the technicals sorted out, Richie, to be able to do that live. Probably won't be at the same time every week, but to get back on live for the Politics Show remotely. I mean, it's all possible to do, and it's just a question of arranging a slot with the station manager, and we should be back hopefully very soon. I'll keep you posted on that one.
Yeah, I do, mate, because our audience, my listeners love you and they love the programme on BCfm, so...
well, we did do a program last week. We did it remotely, but we had to pre-record it. We're just hoping, this is a program you'll find it at thisweek.org.uk. We did a remote program, Martin and I, with an interview with Dr. David Halpin about what his thoughts are on the coronavirus scandal or lockdown. And he's, of course, one of the doctors that was very outspoken about the non-suicide of Dr. David Kelly. Yeah. And then we took a look at RAF Fairford, which is a US Air Force base in Gloucestershire, and very increased activities with the B-2 stealth bombers appearing there and U-2 spy planes buzzing around. The plane spotters tell us, and of course we got some analysis about what could be going on with all these extra American jets and bombers and Air Force arriving at Fairford Air Base just up the road from Bristol in Gloucestershire. Nobody in the country doing that, discussing that, not on any commercial station, like your programme on BCfm, thisweek.org.uk, and I'm flapping there because I'm trying to think of what I wanted to say. Yes, what I wanted to say is I can tell you one quick thing about that is that the local newspaper just did it as isn't it wonderful? Look at these wonderful American airplanes that are arriving, and they had big pictures of them. We are blessed with the presence of these wonderful nuclear B-2 stealth bombers and great pictures of them, and no linking this at all with the potential war. That this could be, of course, this whole lockdown thing could be a kind of drill and exercise. I think Pompeo did talk about it as a live exercise of putting the population onto a wartime footing, back to rationing and all that sort of thing. So we could be looking at that, and it all depends, really, doesn't it, on how long this lockdown really lasts? Because the goalposts seem to be shifting the whole time
on a day-by-day basis. Stay safe in New Zealand, and come back on whenever you want. And keep us posted about the Politics Show. The point I was going to make is one of the things that's marvellous about your show is how interactive it is. And I love that about it. Thanks, T. Look after yourself.
Okay, yeah, one of the things Martin says is we're deconstructing the New World Order's agenda in real time, and we do try and do that. It's very important that people do it because it is possible to do. It's just that people who are overpaid in the mainstream press have got no interest in doing that. All they're interested in doing is seeing their own face on the television and increasing their salary, and I suppose they're just basically sycophants.
The Richie Allen Show is live and interactive. All episodes are archived on Podomatic, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. For more details, go to richieallen.co.uk.
Yes, you were listening to Tony Gosling there, recorded by me this morning. He's in New Zealand. We're back live in the room. It's coming up for 6 minutes past 6 on Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, the 2nd of April 2020. We're back live in the room. My name is Richie Allen. Hayden Hewitt will be live. There's that word they love in the mainstream media again. He'll be live with me in 5 minutes' time. A very important story. Astonishing, really. Don't miss him, the co-founder of LiveLeak.com and the man behind TriggerWarning.tv. Hayden Hewitt joins me in a moment. Before that, we will take a tune. Thanks for your tweets. Lots of comments coming in there while I was chatting with Tony. I couldn't read them because the conversation was recorded, as I said. So there you go. Alrighty. I was going to do headlines, but I won't do headlines because I want to crack on. Back in a minute.
Thanks to you, The Richie Allen Show is the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. Show your support for this unique broadcaster by making a regular financial contribution. Just the price of a cup of coffee each month will make a massive difference. Visit richieallen.co.uk for details.
Music from the late, great Pete Shelley. This is Buzzcocks. Marvellous stuff. Back with Hayden Hewitt. 10 minutes past the hour. Buzzcocks on the Richie Allen radio show. Pete Shelley took the future Mrs. Allen to see them at the Albert Hall in Manchester about 2.5 years ago. The acoustics were terrible and are terrible in Manchester's Albert Hall. Most recent visit there was to see the Mavericks, another band we love. We've eclectic taste, you see. I listen to anything. Bit of Dolly Parton on one night. I don't know, a little bit of Carole King on, then a bit of ACD. I listen to anything. And of course Bruce and all the rest of it. Let's see, can we get Hayden on the line? And while we do that, we will remind ourselves of that story that we were astonished to read on bbc.co.uk yesterday. A story that was covered by pretty much most of the media yesterday. It was pretty, melodrama, adjectives. We don't like to be dramatic. Rotten, right? Rotten. Okay. I'm going to see. Okay, we do. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I was rambling there because I wanted to make sure Hayden was in the room. Hayden is in the room. We will hear from him in a couple of seconds. Yes, that story mentioned at the top of the programme that did the rounds yesterday shocked a lot of people. Understandably, it shocked a lot of people. A GP sending letters to patients whose health is pretty bad and whose life expectancy isn't great, saying, listen, do please complete a do not resuscitate form if you don't mind, because it would be best if you got very ill. It would be best if we didn't send the ambulance around to see you because of the current crisis. Better that we try and help the young and the more fit. Kind of astonishing. I had a conversation with my friend and colleague Hayden Hewitt about this the other day because this has happened in his family. Pretty much this has happened in his family. And he tweeted the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, to tell Andy Burnham about a shocking incident that happened to his mother-in-law, his wife's mother, who is a senior lady and who hasn't been well. Let's welcome to the programme the co-founder of LiveLeak.com, one of the most important websites in the world, and the man behind TriggerWarning.tv. He presents daily programmes on Trigger Warning on YouTube with his friend and colleague Graham Booth. Terrific content, a lot of the time funny, pithy, savvy, savage, outrageous, but it's very good. Let's welcome back our friend Hayden Hewitt. Hayden, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, Rich. Yeah, I'm not so bad, mate. How are you?
I'm not bad at all. I know you're a bit on the knackered side, so thanks for coming on.
That's good. No, I'm okay. I'm all right. It was just one of those, like you're not eating yet. You're just having a little dip.
I know. The programme is on at a terrible time for UK-based guests because it's smack bang in the middle of tea time for most people.
Right.
So go on.
I've had my tea. I've had a cup of coffee. I'm raring to go.
Brilliant.
Got the whole evening ahead of me now.
Well, thanks, mate. And you're on air tonight at 11 o'clock with Graham on Trigger Warning. We'll talk about that a bit later on. Of course, Yanks, by the way, tea means our supper, effectively. I'm having me tea. What the bloody hell does that mean? It means we're having our supper. It's tea. There's a friend of mine called Phil in Fallowfield. I had a big argument with him about this. Tea. It's not tea, it's your dinner, Phil. It's breakfast, lunch and dinner. No, it's your tea. So I've come around to that way of thinking.
With all due respect, Richie, I will not be schooled on English by an Irishman. Let's get that straight.
Fair enough. I'd like to say English is my second language. It isn't. English is my first language. Gaeilge is my second language. Now let's talk about this because this is very serious.
This is.
Speaking to your lovely wife, looking after her mum, your mother-in-law, who's not been well. You learned something that was pretty startling, and it was amazing that you did because it was around about the time that we were hearing about these letters being sent out elsewhere in the country. Pick up the story. What's happened?
Excuse me. Well, what happened? We got a call saying she wasn't well. I have to point out at this point, I've been doing this. The care home are amazing. They've tried everything they can do, but she wasn't well. She was short of breath, non-communicative. She's an 83-year-old woman with dementia.
Right.
Now, in 2018, she had a milder case of pneumonia. Identical symptoms. I finally got her in an ambulance in the middle of the night. She was in hospital for no more than 8 hours. She was given liquids, antibiotics, right as pain.
Lovely.
So this time, the guys at the home said, look, we've been on to 111. They won't come and get her. I said, why are other people ill? Is the COVID? Because they've been on lockdown for weeks.
Yeah.
They said, no, we've not got any problems so far. We got staff off, but no problems with the residents. So 111 said we won't send anybody. So they contacted the GP. And remember, at this point, no one's seen her. The GP said, okay, I won't come out. We're not seeing patients. I'll prescribe paracetamol. And if that doesn't work, I'll put an end-of-life package in place.
Jesus.
Now, we were all stunned, and I had to sit down for 5 minutes. And I was thinking there's got to be something between over-the-counter headache tablets and an end-of-life package.
Yeah.
That can't be the two things we're working on. So I got back in touch with the home, discussed it with them, realised, they were trying everything they could do, but they were hitting a brick wall. The GPs wouldn't come out. So I spoke to a guy, someone put me in touch with a guy at The Guardian who I've been talking to. And they said, look, we know this is going on. We can't get traction yet. But this, with me being such a graphic story and firsthand, hopefully we can get some traction. So they've been helping put some pressure on. I contacted Andy Burnham via Twitter, and someone I've been very critical of in the past. But to his credit, I don't know what they've done yet, but he's been in personal contact. And, sometimes even a bit of recognition gives you the energy to move forward.
How is she now, Hayden? How is before we talk more about the response to it, how is your mother-in-law now? How is she doing now?
She's still the same. However, we got a call from the doctor today, and this is the most damning part, and this is what everyone has to really pay attention. We knew at some point triage was going to be a thing, but we didn't know we were there yet. But this is where it gets really creepy. The doctor called my wife today. Whoever's poked them, we don't know yet. We said, okay, we're going to try some antibiotics. Bear in mind, she's refusing things. She's in bed screaming, oh, God, help me.
Yeah.
And she's from Glasgow, dude. I mean, the minute they go near her, she says, help me. Will you take some tablets? Yeah, here's your tablets. Fuck off.
Yeah.
She's difficult. But we'll prescribe antibiotics, he said, but we're treating it as COVID-19. So I said, but you've not seen her. He said, well, the symptoms, I said, everything's got symptoms of COVID-19. What are you talking about? No, we're treating her as that, and if she went to hospital now, they wouldn't put her on a ventilator. How is this from? And then he just went off.
They wouldn't put her on a ventilator. Why
that's
not?
What he said. Well, because only the younger people are getting treatment. But I didn't realise we were there yet. I didn't realise we were already at the point where if we even suspect an old person of having COVID-19, showing symptoms that could be for any one of 10 different respiratory ailments, we're going to let them die. We're going to let them die at home. Those care workers in that home, they've got to tell people's families we're doing nothing for them, but you'll be allowed to come and see them before they die.
Even though, just to go back, and you've been incredibly clear and concise now with the story. Just to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, when the initial contact was made to the emergency services by the care home, they said they wouldn't do anything, but they acknowledged that they were hardly overwhelmed with activity at that particular time.
They didn't say that. That's me saying that based on what I know.
Based on what you know, right.
The last couple of days, I mean, I'm nobody important, but I'm very fortunate that I do have contacts, that I can reach out to, including yourself. I'm now on a radio show going out to 30,000 people to warn people about this. Yeah. I'm fortunate. Our concern, obviously, is with our mother-in-law, a woman who's been so good to me since I've known her.
Yeah.
However, it's not just that, and I spoke to Mrs. Hewitt about this. If this is happening to us, and this isn't just her GP getting it completely wrong, how many other people is this happening to right now who aren't as fortunate as me in being able to reach out and make a fuss?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're underselling yourself. LiveLeak.com is massive. Everybody knows who you are. You've had national media exposure many times. So in
the grand scheme of things, I'm fortunate.
Well, when you tweet Andy Burnham's going to pay attention because you are in part control of one of the biggest websites on planet Earth. So they get back to you. So obviously the key question here is, right, you want to rage against the GP and the emergency services. Of course you do. But of course you're a very savvy and a very clever man. You want to know, where's the directive come from?
Yeah, where's this come from? This is the most important thing to me right now. If it's a rogue GP making bad decisions,
yeah,
and I have to allow for it could be because I don't know. You know how I work.
Yeah, you're a proof-based. I know that, and I admire that about you. But I'm gonna jump the shark on this. I'm gonna go one ahead of you.
Well, I'll actually jump the shark for you.
Go ahead.
Whilst I have to allow that's a possibility, and that's bad enough, I can deal with that. There's ways and means that we can deal with that legally and properly. I believe that it's got nothing to do with the local GP. We know where this has come down from.
Yeah.
Now, everyone will have their own theories as to how's, why's, what's, when's, that it's part of this or it's part of that, or they're trying to care. Well, whatever it is, my focus right now, I can't handle that. But what I can do is, right, I'm going to make as much noise as I possibly can because I believe old people and vulnerable people are being left to die when they don't have to.
They don't need to.
If we were overwhelmed, if there were 40,000 people looking for an intensive care bed tomorrow, I would get it. I wouldn't like it. But if you can't treat everyone, you have to treat the ones most likely to recover. We understand that horrible fact, but we are not there. We are just not there yet.
We couldn't be there. Listen, at the very least, the people involved, the medical people, could have said to you, Mr. Hewitt, or to your wife, Mrs. Hewitt, look, we're struggling here. I'll tell you what we'll do, and it won't do any harm. I've got some strong antibiotics. We'll get her on them. They could have done that much. There's not a lot of manpower there, you know.
3 days with me badgering them.
That's horrendous. That's horrendous.
It's despicable. It's absolutely despicable. That it's wrong to let people die. It's wrong to do that to families. It's wrong to do that to care workers. Because those guys in those homes, they're often overlooked, but they're every bit as amazing as the nurses on the front line and the doctors on the front line. They care for those residents.
They live with people like your mother-in-law. They love them.
They're the horror stories.
Yes,
all I've seen
right.
is an overwhelming amount of love in those places. And they've got to watch people die when they know they don't have to. This can't be right. So what I've had to do is filter out all the reasons people are giving me for this happening, because I can't deal with those. I can't change.
No.
You know, a government, I can't change a new world order. I can't prove, disprove, or anything. All I can do is try and give my mother-in-law a fighting chance, because that's all we're asking. If she can't be saved, then she can't be saved. But try.
At
and
least
GPs,
try, yeah.
what is going on with GPs that they won't? We're not visiting the sick in case we get poorly. You get £70,000 a year to sit on your ass using Google and referring people to a specialist.
You took an oath. You took an oth before you became a doctor.
Oath.
That's right. You took an
Get
oath.
out there. If I can risk my health to take things to my parents, or if my neighbours will, or if you phoned me tomorrow and said, look, me and the future Mrs. Allen, we're not well, we're not well. I'd do what I had to do.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I'd be there, and you would, for me, and that's what people do. GPs should be doing it for everybody. If I do it for a stranger, why can't a GP? And we're not special in doing that. And nearly everyone listening right now would do that for somebody, because people overwhelmingly are decent. So what is going on? What is going on? I'm genuinely concerned. As one of the guys from one of the newspapers that I spoke to said, that his words, this is a mainstream journalist, there's something sinister happening.
You're right to take with a large pinch of salt the many explanations offered over Twitter. And I'm not going to say but at all, because I certainly do not have a clue what's going on there. I will say this and this only. This is the only thing I would say. And it's not coming from me. There's a couple of brilliant writers at the Telegraph and the Daily Mail. Sadly, one of them passed away, Christopher Booker. And they've been saying for the last few years that the Liverpool care pathway, end-of-life care ideology, which apparently was shelved and kind of wrapped up, mainstream journalists don't believe that that's ever really gone away. And a lot of mainstream journalists believe that thinking has evolved through initiatives like the Liverpool Care Pathway in recent years to basically make it easier to remove care from the elderly and the infirm. And that's all I would say. I'm not saying it's that, because I take...
Well, it's like the DNRs, though. My mother-in-law does have a DNR. When she was ill last time, we did sit with the doctors, and they did explain, look, if this worsens... Because remember, she was, you know yourself, she was poorly for a long time. She wasn't in great condition. He said, if we have to resuscitate her, there's every chance we'll do terrible damage to her. You know, because she was in a very bad way and she could be worse off. So my wife and her family made this in. If her heart failed, don't smash her to bits to bring her back to die again. Now, the DNR was redone on Monday. I don't know who gave permission for that, but the DNR was updated, and I asked, why does DNR mean do not treat? Because it's actually DNAR now, isn't it? It's do not attempt resuscitation.
Yeah.
When did that become do not treat? Because we're not asking them to resuscitate her. We're asking them to
treat her. To give her some antibiotics. You see, these are the questions that I hope you contacted The Guardian, and I hope people at the Daily Mail, because as bad as the Daily Mail can be, you know, in terms of race baiting and stuff like that.
This is about making noise, isn't it, Richie?
Exactly,
it's not about
mate. You're right.
One of the guys on Twitter who follows you pulled me up for saying I'd spoke to journalists. It's like, well, to be fair, mate, it's more effective than talking to you. I don't mean you, I mean him. You know, they've got reach. But when a mainstream journalist says to you, when a mainstream says, this is sinister, these guys know, I mean, you know yourself, they're plugged into everybody.
Of course they have, and they have huge followings and big readerships. You know,
and they all know each other, and they all talk. Things can't print. We do it. You know, we all do. We all talk about things we might not say on air or even discuss on air. But when you hear like this is sinister, you think, no, this is sinister.
You've got a real fondness for the elderly. I know you do from knowing you as long as I have, and your dad is an elderly gentleman.
To be honest, from my bullshit, I like people.
You like people, but you have. I know you've got an affinity with
you must
elderly
protect
people.
the vulnerable and the elderly. You must. That's the way I was raised. It's the way I was brought up.
I have a big problem with the attitude towards older people on these islands. In general. I don't mean everybody, but I
usually
think
disrespectful.
I think so, and I think in other cultures, particularly in Islam, in the Islamic culture or religion, Judaism, for the most part, the Chinese, they really respect a lot of credence given to the. Can I ask you this? I believe in recent years we've seen, not just medically, but socially, we've seen a bit of a turn against older people in this country.
There with you. We've always been, in all comedy and all fiction, old people are there as the grit in the Vaseline. The disrespect to old people, we saw it when the coronavirus started. It was the boomer remover.
Yeah.
The thing I've always, because I was, community minded, what my family alike would describe you. My father looked after numerous relatives at the end of their life because it's just the way I was brought up. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I'd love to ask some of these people, have you ever actually sat down with an old person you don't know and spoken to them? Because
the answer is no for most people.
They're grounded human beings. You in your 20s with your top knot, you're a human being. You're not even close to finished yet.
No.
You're not even ripe yet.
Yeah.
These people have lived a full life that most of us will never experience. They paved the way for us to have the comforts that we have. Everyone focuses, the boomers left us this, left us that. Yeah, they also financed the internet, medical advancements. They suffered hardships. They put their time in. They deserve the care. They deserve the attention. They deserve some respect.
And even if you don't want to respect them, they paid into the fucking system for 60 years. Yeah. End of story.
When I say respect, I don't mean you have to defer automatically.
No, I know what you mean, yeah, but I'm just saying, even if you don't want to, if you think that they're a bunch of scratchy old curmudgeonly arseholes, well, fair enough, think that, but they paid into the system. They've paid their dues.
They've done their time.
Yeah.
They've done their time, they've raised their kids, they've done the work, they've paid the tax. To be honest, most old people have suffered hardship. I mean, and people are moaning about the lock-in. Yeah, it's mildly annoying. It's, the business side of things is going to cripple a lot of us, myself included. But do you know what? I'd rather go through this than the blitz.
Yeah.
These guys have suffered hardship. These guys, let's take care of them. They took care of us.
And as Muslims always say, when you come into the world kicking and screaming, you are a cigarette paper away from dying at any given time of the day. But your parents and your grandparents, for the most part, when you have good parents and grandparents, are there for you and look after you and clothe you and bring you up. So you got to do it for them. Let me just do a very quick recap. You can do it if you want. Hayden,
no.
Hayden Hewitt, liveleak.com, triggerwarning.tv. Hayden's mother-in-law is in a care home. She has dementia. A couple of years back, she had mild pneumonia. She's been unwell very recently with an infection, maybe breathing difficulties, and she's not been doing well. And the care home felt compelled to call the emergency services, who wouldn't come out to her, and referred it back to the family GP, who also said, I won't come out and I won't treat. Wouldn't treat at all, even in terms of antibiotics or anything like that. But actually, at that stage, without having seen Hayden's mother-in-law, Mrs. Hewitt's mum, recommended or said we'd send out end-of-life care package. This is astonishing. And it's astonishing all the more.
You know what's in the end-of-life care package?
Well, I was coming to that this second, my friend, because because a number of people are tweeting that. So before you answer that, I just wanted to reiterate that while this is happening to Hayden's family, stories emerged in the press about similar incidences happen around the country, in Liverpool and in Wales as well. It is shocking. And a Guardian journalist a friend and a contact of Hayden's said that he or she is hearing this stuff as well, and it's very sinister. And what Hayden Hewitt wants to do is not to jump in and start screaming abuse at the GP, although you might want to say a few words to him or her.
It's on the cards, mate, I'll be honest.
Undoubtedly, but the cerebral thing to do, and the clever thing to do, and the journalistic thing to do, and you are a journalist, is to say, right, where is this really coming from? The care package itself, what does it involve? Of course, I was coming to that.
Well, this is an established thing anyway, but these were the outlines supposedly for when the COVID-19 infection becomes untenable in terms of numbers. What's in the end-of-life package is morphine for pain, sedatives, an antiemetic, so you're not sick, and then I guess a diuretic so that your tubes are kept as dry as they can be, and as mucus free, because pneumonia, as you know, it plugs you up with mucus. So it's this cocktail of drugs meant to keep you basically as pain free as possible, asleep until you die. And that's what that is. So you jump from paracetamol to, right, happy trails. Catch you later. And it's got to be stressed again and again that the doctor said we're treating it as COVID-19 when no one has been anywhere near her, and the symptoms, as vague as they are at the best of times, could be anything. But the people at the home put her on FaceTime for me so I could see. I could have been in that room in 2018 when she had the pneumonia. It was the same, exactly the same language she was using, the way she was describing things, the way she was asking God to help her.
Yeah.
And she's not a religious lady, by the way. We say, oh, please, God, help me, help me, help me.
Yeah.
Identical. So for a dog.
Thanks for reiterating that part about the COVID-19 thing, because that's relevant. Them saying we think she might have COVID-19, but we're not even going to look at her, because that's relevant to the story that emerged in Wales. It's like, well, she has COVID-19, we think, so therefore we're going to, use the resources we have to look after people with COVID-19 who are younger and who have a fighting chance or a better chance. It's important that you reiterated that. It's astonishing. And if you go on to Twitter now, and people are tweeting you as we speak, they're tweeting me, and they're saying they're disgusted to hear that, because it doesn't sound remotely like, and of course I'm no medical expert, as I know you're not, but because you've been there and you have the care home people's word as well. Your mother-in-law isn't dying. She's not dying. She's very distressed, obviously, and she's under duress with the infection, but she's obviously not dying. So to say, without seeing her, and Hayden's just disappeared there. I thought it had gone quiet there for a second. Let me get him back on there very quickly. But to say without seeing her, well, it looks like COVID-19 to us, therefore we're going to withdraw care. It's astonishing. 24 minutes to the top of the hour. I hope Hayden's phone battery hasn't died. We are speaking over Skype, of course, but I know he stepped outside to take this call, and maybe his battery has run down. This is the Richie Allen Radio Show, broadcasting live from Salford in Greater Manchester. My name is Richie Allen. You are with the BBG, not the BBC. Last live programme of the week. Sunday View will be live with the roundup of the Sunday newspapers on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, although the Sunday newspapers will undoubtedly be full of nothing else but coronavirus. But it might be a slightly different type of Sunday View. We might have more music in it. But Sunday View live at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. And for the time being, while this coronavirus thing is dominating the news agenda, I will just do the live radio show Monday to Thursday and Sunday. I won't be doing so many of the live streams. Okay. Alrighty. And there is an internet problem, I think. And I might be offline. So what I'm going to do, in the meantime, is take a tune and see can we sort something out. Alrighty. This is Eminem and Lose Yourself, ironically, as we've lost the signal. Back in a moment. Right, music from Eminem on your Richie Allen Radio Show. 17 minutes to the top of the hour. Lost Hayden Hewitt because The internet dropped out. I'm hoping we can get it back and we can catch up with him, catch him again just for another few minutes to wrap that up. Staggering stuff that, though. The idea that a lady in a care home in her early 80s, not dying, but suffering a nasty infection, not well, breathing difficulties. The care home contacts the emergency services, who don't want to come out. They claim, without having seen the lady, that it might be down to COVID-19 or coronavirus. It's referred to the family doctor, the GP. He says something about paracetamol, reiterates that it sounds like coronavirus, and therefore he won't be seeing or coming out to see the lady in the care home, but will send an end-of-life care package. It is astonishing stuff, this. It really is. And just to say that Hayden Hewitt, co-founder of LiveLeak.com, one of the world's biggest websites, one of the most, I think it's in the top 200 websites in terms of daily views on planet Earth. Hugely popular website, very important in terms of, over the years, I've used it time and time again to watch videos and to listen to reports that have been banned effectively by the mainstream media. Hayden reaching out to journalists and journalists telling him that they're hearing that this is going on. He, of course, and his wife want to know, where does it end, or basically where does it begin? Right? It's not the GPs deciding to do this. Who has issued instructions to GPs? Who has said to GPs? Who has given the instruction to GPs to do this? That's where the crux of this, because it's astonishing. We're back streaming. I'm sorry for the drop out there. I've rebooted that's only happened about twice in 6 years or 5.5 years of the Richie Allen radio show, that the internet died during the show like that. So thanks for sticking around, mate. Thanks for staying. Hayden Hewitt is back in the room with us. So, no,
I understand these things.
I know you do better than anybody. I know you do, because you do so much live broadcasting and streaming. But
yeah, we get it wrong every week. So for a genuine thing to happen, is fantastic. It's usually my fault or Graham's. Let me rephrase.
No, mate, you broadcast in ultra high definition using very sophisticated equipment, and you use enormous amounts of bandwidth. It doesn't happen to me it's very rare, in fact, that the internet drops and I have to reboot. It certainly doesn't happen.
But to be fair, there was just one more thing I really wanted to get across, and it's going to sound really trite. But please believe this is from the bottom of my heart. Any of you guys listening, I know a lot of you are, and the vast majority of you are really good people. No matter what you think of the virus, no matter what you think's causing it, or anything else, any elderly or vulnerable people, keep an eye on them, look after them.
Absolutely right.
Because the system that should be isn't. So it's up to us. So no matter of anything else, look after them, because it's the right thing to do.
Listen, mate, that's the most important thing that anybody can say. It is, to me, and I don't know everything, I don't know anything at the best of times. As far as I'm concerned, whatever is going on, there is a particularly hostile and nasty infection going around. I have no doubt in my mind there is. And as you quite rightly said there, I want to echo and endorse what you said and commend you for saying it. When you are the great age that your mother-in-law is, and other elderly people in their community, they are more likely to get that thing. So look out for them. Absolutely, Hayden, 100%.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? We can all debate and discuss, and as you know, no matter how ridiculous I might find something, there's always time to discuss and debate and chew the fat and see what we can find out and see what we come up with. But at this point in time, keeping people alive, that's all that matters. Too
right. Your wife must be very distressed, mate. Thoughts, I hate this saying, it's a real mainstream media saying, thoughts go out to her. They do go out to her, because that must be a rotten thing to be dealing with. You want to know that the doctors and the emergency services are treating your aging and ailing mum just the same as they would anybody else. So she must be struggling with this.
Well, it's like, as you know, my old man, he's on dialysis.
Yeah.
So I've got them locked down tight, but he still has to go out. But obviously, I've had to drill in to my parents now. If you go out, if you get ill, they will
Don't tell me we've dropped out again, have we? I hope not. We're back. We disappeared again for a second.
He dropped out, yeah. If he even gets a sniffle, they're going to let him die. No doubt about it in my mind. So I've got them locked down tight.
Imagine what you just said there about your dad who's on dialysis and he's not well. Mr. Hewitt, your dad that you loved that brought you up, if he gets a sniffle, they're just going to let him die.
Oh, yeah, there's no hope he'll get any form of anything. Because clearly he, in a triage situation, he acknowledges the fact, if the hospitals were overloaded, he knows he wouldn't get a look in. He knows that, and he's come to terms. He understands.
Imagine that.
But it just seems at the minute we're moving a bit too quick here. So the overarching thing is we can all agree, disagree, shout at each other online. We can have a whale of a time discussing whether it's it originated from the CDC place at Wuhan or the wet market or a 5G tower. No matter where people think it came from, the most important thing right now is doing whatever you can to help other people.
It's happening. You've just summed up something I had a lady on the program last night, very interesting lady, worked for FEMA. I was able to confirm that. And she spoke about some very sinister things that are going to happen in the next few years with respect to transhumanism. And much or most of what she was saying is pretty accurate. It's shocking stuff, but it's pretty accurate. It was interesting that a lot of correspondence came my way ridiculing the woman because she believes that there's a heaven and hell aspect to it because she's a religious lady. And I'm like, listen, I don't care if the lady Celeste Solon believes it's all happening because it's the devil or because it's Luciferian. She might or might not be right. I have no idea. The fact is, as far as I'm concerned, it's happening. Now, this is completely different. What you're saying is 100% right. They're doing this to our senior citizens. Leave your arguments about the genesis of it to one side for today. It's happening. It's got to be bloody amplified. You're going to stay, presumably, on Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester.
Oh, yeah. I've got his also, to be fair, not only have I heard from him, the director of the mayor's office is in regular contact now as well. Now, I had to put this online, as you know, like I said earlier, I'm hypercritical of politicians, as we all should be at all times. But just to even acknowledge me, do you know what? All right, I'm going to give it to you. You've got back to me personally. Now let's see if something happens.
Yeah.
It's all these things, all the things I have to set aside. Because you know what? There's a goal. Everything in life has a goal. You've always got a goal. If you're a truth seeker, that's a very dispersed goal. But in everything in life, we have one thing we got to do. My main goal now is to give my mother-in-law a fighting chance. The secondary goal is to make as much noise through as many channels as I possibly can to try and maybe help some other people. Now, imagine if all of us listening to this did that. Because this is the thing we keep forgetting. We're all sat around bickering and arguing. We all do. You and I do it, Richie.
Yeah, too right, we do, yeah.
We phone each other every couple of weeks and we argue about something or other. We haven't made a difference, but we've made ourselves feel better.
That's right.
Imagine if we managed to put all that aside and just go, look, I don't care what you believe comes out the arse of an aeroplane right now.
Yeah,
We've
absolutely.
got this goal right now. Let's look after these people. Let's expose that if we even had a vague amount of focus, we could move mountains.
Now, this will presumably come up as it should do tonight on Trigger Warning when you'll be on with Graham. I know there are people tweeting who have experienced this. What you've been saying this evening is making a lot of sense to them because they've seen it themselves. The Trigger Warning show will be on air tonight. It's on YouTube. You can find the details at triggerwarning.tv around about 11 o'clock.
YouTube.com/triggerwarningtv. And by the way, we'll be throwing open the lines almost that you can come on via voice or with a webcam.
Yeah, do that.
Send a request. We'll throw you a link. You come and join us.
YouTube.com/triggerwarningtv. They'll be talking about this tonight, Hayden and Graham. And if it is affecting you or you've got an opinion on it, they'll be happy to hear from you tonight.
Oh, yeah, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, great stuff, mate. Yeah.
Because the important thing is, like saying anything else, as we always say, I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to believe you. But if you've got something to say, it'll be heard.
You can say it here.
You might not like what I say afterwards, but that's fine.
That's fine, isn't it? Absolutely. The genuinely from the heart, the best, and all the love in the world to your mother-in-law. And
Thanks for come on and talk about it.
Really, not at all. It's if shows don't do that, well, they shouldn't go to air to begin with. I mean that, and you know that. And all the best to Mrs. Hewitt as well, and to Hayden Jr. Stay on it, mate. And when there's any news on it next week, come back and tell us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be texting you anyway. But yes, I will definitely come back and tell everyone whatever. And if I find anything out, I'll make sure everybody knows about it.
Godspeed to your mother-in-law. Have a good show tonight. Trigger Warning TV, youtube.com/Trigger Warning TV. Between 10:30 and 11. I think it'll be 11 tonight when the lads are on air. Is that right?
Thank you, Rich.
Not at all,
mate.
That's
absolutely correct.
Go and have your tea. You know, you've already had your tea. Go and sit down and chill out.
I'm actually going to go and watch a movie with Junior.
Go and watch it and relax, mate. And I'll see you on air tonight. Thanks very much, Hayden.
See you later. Cheers, fella.
Speak soon. Hayden Hewitt there. Absolutely shocking news emerging in the last few days about senior citizens in this country who have, who's some of them have got life-limiting conditions. Others are developing breathing difficulties, and they might have the flu, they might have pneumonia, they might have mild pneumonia. In the case of Hayden's mother-in-law, and they are being told, without being seen, well, it sounds like COVID-19 to us, therefore we're not going to come and see you. And in the case of Hayden's wife's mother, it was suggested that an end-of-life care package be sent out to her. There you are, you can die at home now. The lady isn't dying. She has dementia. She's in her early 80s. And she's in a care home, but she isn't dying. Yeah. So I also try not to deal in absolutes. And I also try not to say things like, well, this is what it is, because I don't know what it is. But I do know all about the Liverpool Care Pathway. Now, let's give some credit where some credit is due. He's gotten a couple of mentions this week. He might not be mentioned for weeks or months, but he gets the occasional mention. David Icke did a lot in his books about the Liverpool Care Pathway, which has been very controversial, and which was wound up effectively as an idea. But again, senior journalists at the Telegraph and the Daily Mail particularly believe that it's never gone away. It's a very sinister thing, wrapped up in, a lovely pink bow, made to look lovely. Oh, well, this is how we make life more comfortable for people who are dying or, people who have life-limiting conditions. This is the Liverpool Care Pathway. This is how we should proceed when people reach, the stage where they are, maybe close to death. But in fact, and it's been proven, in my opinion, again through the work of researchers and through the investigative journalism of the Telegraph and the Daily Mail, that in fact it wasn't. It was covertly a way to hasten the ending of lives of senior citizens. Right? I haven't said that very well, but there you are. It's been a long day and I'm a bit knackered. Liverpool Care Pathway. It's come up on Twitter quite a few times this evening. I have seen that. Listen, thanks to Hayden for coming on. Liveleak.com, the website, triggerwarning.tv, but the YouTube channel is youtube.com/triggerwarning.tv. That's where they'll be broadcasting live tonight. They're not in the studios tonight, of course, because of this lockdown. They're broadcasting from their homes, Graham Booth and Hayden Hewitt, so check it out. I'll leave you and love you and say that I'll be back I'm glad I managed to reboot the bloody internet and get back on air. I'll be back with you on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock UK time, 11 o'clock BST, where we will have a look through the Sunday newspapers, which will of course be dominated by this virus thing, but we'll play a few tunes, we'll have a few laughs. Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. It's been good to be back with you this week. Thanks for being there for me. Thanks for staying with me. I've been Richie Allen. Look after yourselves and one another. Going to close out with a lovely tune from the Black Eyed Peas. It's a song called Where Is the Love. I'll see you on Sunday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, eh? Bye for now. Thanks, Hayden. Thanks, Tony Gosling.